Hello fellow crafty souls. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today my Year of the Stretch card is featuring my monthly hero card kit from February 2022. I wanted to try a bit more of an abstract style and do a bit of watercolouring while I was at it. So here is the February kit. I also started out using that background stamp and my Karin markers and some Versamark. And I watercoloured on some Canson watercolour paper. So this card actually did not turn out the way I originally intended. So I decided to leave my process in. So here I am, I'm just about to use the red rubber stamp, background stamp, and white heat emboss it. So just using some Versamark, and because I like a nice crisp design, I ended up stamping this 3 times with my Versamark. You can see I've previously used a stamp with like a black stamp or something, so made it easier to see. And because I'm running out of my embossing powder, I ended up just pouring the whole thing straight over the design. Now, mistake I actually made with my using my embossing powder is I didn't actually use my anti-static powder tool before I did the heat embossing. Thankfully, with this design, because there wasn't too much fine detail in it, I was lucky with not much actually sticking. So, as everyone, all the other fellow crafters comment on the magic of embossing. Love it. So I wasn't sure what to do with my colour design. I was really lacking some crafty mojo on this particular day. So I pulled out my Catherine Pooler colour wheel and decided to go with using some complementary colours on the colour wheel. So they sit opposite each other on the colour wheel. And I don't have any proper ink stand, so I just used the back side of my mini cube ink holder. And I'm using Catching Rays and Serenade from Catherine Pooler inks. So again, what I'm actually doing here doesn't end up featuring in the final card design. The thought process was to actually kind of do like a spotlight design with the yellow in the middle, spotlighting the eventual design. And here I oopsied and put my finger in the ink. And yeah, no, I was at that point where I just was like, oh, I'll just colour straight over the top of it. So going in with the Serenade, nice and dark. Oh, cluster of birds flying by, sounds beautiful. So going through and layering that up to blend that, create that spotlight design. So this card design was actually inspired, I think, by I think it was a Mindy Egan design, where she spotlighted one of the designs. But yeah, my crafty mojo just went out the door on this particular day that I was making this card. I just felt like I had to craft, and the designs just weren't going where I needed them to. So just cleaning off the embossing powder off the top of the, cleaning the ink off the top of the embossing powder. So I decided to stamp the door design. I love this abstract design. And I'm stamping it with my VersaFine because I want to do some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Because I want to do some water colouring with my Karin brush markers. So here I did actually use my anti-static powder tool, as you can see. And I'm stamping on some Canson watercolour cold press paper, so it is a little bit smoother, but to get a nice crisp design, I I stamped it out 3 times. Now just coating it with some clear embossing powder. And there was a little tub I was holding up just before, and that was actually some white embossing puff powder, and I thought, ooh, that would be interesting. I saw another designer actually popping a bit of some glossy accents into the clouds and then sprinkling in some of that, so here I go, glossy accents into the clouds and then putting that white puff embossing powder over the top of the glossy accents. And I'd not actually used this white puff embossing powder previously, so I was really surprised with how cool this actually turned out and how dimensional it sat on top of the glossy accents. So just give that a pour all over. Now, obviously I didn't go back in with my anti-static powder tool. Yeah. And when I'm actually doing my heat embossing, I'll start by doing it a little bit behind, and then I'll come back down and heat over the top. And I found, no, this is just my personal findings, that doing that little bit of heat from underneath and then coming in from on top, I find it doesn't come out as bumpy. So I don't know if like heating from underneath kind of melts it a little bit at the base first, so it provides a little bit more of a smooth surface sitting over the top of the cardstock. I don't know. That's my thought process. Sounds legit. So I'm happy with how that puff has actually turned out beautiful and dimensional. So now I'm going to use my Royal Langen Nickel round number 2 brush and my trusty glass of water, and I love my Karin brush markers. I sat through a Christina Warner tutorial and how she did all her ink, her colour swatches for her Karin brush markers. Now all the different colours that I'm using I will actually link in the video description. And I do not claim to be a top-notch colorist by any shape or form whatsoever. I just do what tickles my fancy, basically. So I started out colouring the door panel, and again, no rhyme or reason in terms of laying down shadows or anything like that. Just a bit of a darker door edge. And then I was thinking about how I was going to colour the sky. So what I ended up doing was actually doing a rainbow coloured sky, just because I can. I wanted to, again, I saw another card design and was inspired by the rainbow sky. So I thought with these abstract designs, you know, anything can happen. And that's the beauty of our crafting, is we can basically let our craft flag fly and colour it however we like. So I was going through and yeah, just really happily sitting and blending some colours. I actually found this very peaceful and meditative. I really enjoy watercolouring and just watching the colour spread through the paper. It's the weirdest thing. I just find it very peaceful to watch that ink trail just blossom. I suppose you could use it like a bit of a application to your life and put the colour in and just let it blossom. So I'm back to colouring the panels on the door. I just wanted a little bit darker. And then I used... this was a very deceptive colour. I can't even remember the name of it. I think it was like Rosewood or something. And I found it more yellowy green than brown. So I ended up coming in with a little bit more of a browner colour and just kind of colour glazing over the top of it. And I was happy with that. It just provided that little bit more contrast. And then the door frame, just a nice beautiful blue. Again, no rhyme or reason with my colouring. It was just what was floating my boat. Now the beauty with the watercolours is you can just put a bit of clean water over the top of it and then paper towel and dab it up, and that will actually clean up any boo-boos off the edge of your design. So the game plan, I originally was going to just cut the door out with scissors, and then I went, no, I have the die for this. Why don't I just use that instead? So just cut that down so I can fit it through my Ultra New Mini Blossom die cutting machine. And then I wasn't happy with the white outline anyway, so I went through and trimmed it right back to the edges of the stamp design. again, so see here, I was positioning, and I used my waffle flower A2 frames dies to cut out the panel, and popped it on, looked at it and went, yeah, no, I'm not happy with that. So I popped it onto a white design, white cardstock, and here I had some leftover silver coloured, some holographic cardstock cut out with the Spellbinder's 4 Petals dies. It was the press plate, and so I decided to just cut out a plain white sheet, and here I am just making a couple of A2 cards. That's 4 1/4 by 5.5 cards, and I'm using Nina 110 pound cardstock. But yeah, so the frame that I'd used from a previous card, I will actually link to the making of that card in a previous video. I'll pop the link up in the corner. So here I am just using my score buddy, and again, my preference is using my stylus, but you know, whatever makes you happy. But yeah, the score buddy was, I think, probably one of my happier investments. I didn't realize how much I needed it until I actually got it. So again, so you can see I pressed the first one down with the bone folder that actually comes with the score buddy, and the second one I will for some reason grab another like bone folder style tool to crease that one. I found that both of these particular tools don't leave any sort of plastic marks or shine on the cardstock, so it doesn't really faze me which tool I use. So here I am just looking at that white card panel at the front of the card, and you know, you always find there's a little bit of schmutz that sits on the cardstock, and somehow this door just fit perfectly in this silver frame, and I love that idea. And then I was looking at the cardstock, the white card panel behind it, I'm going, okay, now what can I do? So I found the swirl stencil, my apologies, that's the Hero Arts swirl stencil, and that came out with that particular My Monthly Hero release in February 22, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to actually use some Distress Oxide in Black Soot and just use that to blend in the back. And I started out thinking, okay, I'll just do a little bit like a highlight in the middle and settle the design on top of that. And as I was going, I changed my mind again. So what initially started out as a card that I was so happy with in terms of the previous background, I wasn't overjoyed, to then changing my mind and darkening up my background panel. But yeah, my crafty mojo just wasn't on that day, but I still had the need to craft. So I thought I'd just press through with it and see where my meh takes me. So just giving that a quick wipe down. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised with where my meh took me. So I was stoked with how that turned out. Little hand version of a happy dance there. Now you saw that the stencil stuck really well to the cardstock, the front panel. And that's because I actually had some leftover pixie spray on that from some previous cards I'd made. So I do like to on occasion use the pixie spray with the more detailed and more ornamental style stencils, and it sticks around for a while. So you just rinse your stencil off, wipe it off, and the pixie spray stays on. So here I am just popping some foam tape on the back of the card panel, and I was watching Jennifer Maguire and Christina Warner and the video they did together the other day, just picking out my sentiments and what I want to place in the card. But yeah, so I was watching their video the other day and how they were talking about making sure that there's no soggy bottoms and soggy middles when applying the foam tape. So that was ringing in my ear, and thinking about that and having a bit of a giggle about it all. So the inside sentiment, I've decided to put the dream big, and as part of the stamp set, there's actually some fish design, so I thought just something a little bit different, pop that on the inside of the card. I mean, how gorgeous is this stamp set? Just the designs. But I was so stuck that day, I could not think of anything. So thank goodness for some divine inspiration in the terms of other crafters. Yeah, and this is how my design actually evolved. So I like to pop a bit of glue onto my foam tape. It just allows a little bit of wiggle room when sticking the, cardstock panels down onto the front of your card to make sure it's on straight. And this one I'm gluing directly to the front panel. And yep, and then stick the door design down. Once I get it all together, it just somehow perfectly fit within that frame space. The doors lined up with the edges of the panels and the corners, and it was just such a serendipitous design. I was actually really surprised. So this is the sentiment for the front of the card, and I see there I did actually use my anti-static powder tool and stamped that 3 times as well. Just not wanting to press too hard to distort any of the letters, but wanting to make sure that I got a good impression with the Versamark. And just using the white and a bit of a brush and a bit of a to blow any stray bits around. So as you can see here, I'll heat it up from the back a little first, and then come in from the top and looking for all the shiny bits. I've got to learn how to film the melting embossing powder. So I started out just trimming it out as a solid panel, and I line up my letters to get to the edge of the plastic holding panel, so that gives me that equal distance. I held up the sentiment to the front design of my card and went, yeah, I'm not happy with that either. So I ended up fussy cutting around the sentiment to go onto the front of the card, so it wasn't taking up as much room. And the sentiment actually says, in dreams we plant the seeds for our future, and then on the inside of the card it says dream big. So yes, needed some inspiration that day, and this is where I found it. So I was a lot happier. Just fits in nicely, and everything's sitting a bit skewy, off kilter. And then I thought it needed just a little bit more bling, so I've just found some random little black gems. Just sticking them in no particular order, other than the fact I think it was making sure that it was an odd number. And one up there. And that is it for the card design. I'd just like to say a big thank you for watching today. If you like my videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate you spending time with me today.